Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. Whether you've joined us here in Channing Hall or on Zoom, it's wonderful to be together on this brand new day. We extend a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We invite you to stop by our newcomer table after the service if you haven't already, so that we can get you any information that you like about our congregation. And we invite you to our next Exploring Unitarian Universalism program, which is on Sunday, January 22nd, right after this service. If you signed a visitor card, you'll get an email about that, and we'd love to see you there. A quick reminder that we are collecting magazines in good condition and 2023 calendars for clients of the Trenton Area Soup Kitchen, or TASC. Just bring them to church and put them in boxes underneath the coat rack in Robinson, and TASC will distribute them soon. We're collecting those through next Sunday, January 15th, which is Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday. Speaking of which, our racial justice ministry is working with Interfaith Rise to support 22 refugee families in Trenton. As part of our celebration of King Sunday next weekend, you are invited to contribute living supplies that these families need and that iRise will help distribute. There are specific items that are needed and requested. So if you go to uuprinceton.org and click the MLK Day of Service image, you can sign up to help, and we're asking everyone to bring those items into church next week as well. And lastly, the good news is that we are only 49 weeks away from our next annual Hanging of the Greens service. The bad news is that these greens can't stay there until then. They come down today immediately following the service, and all hands are needed to make this quick and light work for all of us. If you can stick around and help, please do. The garland comes down, the greens come off, the decorations on the tree and the garland are either quickly claimed or quickly tossed, and the greens are returned to nature through those doors down by the trees. And then there's sweeping. Lots and lots of sweeping. Thank you in advance for your help, and if in doubt, ask our sexton Jorge what to do, and he'll know. And now, friends, on this holy day, let us gather in peace and unity, as one before the grace and grandeur of life, as children before its great and loving mystery. In this hour, may we know anew the holy joy of human lives growing together, so that this hour will imbue all those to come with that same sacred awareness. Come, let us worship together.
The words for today's chalice lighting are from Ralph Waldo Emerson. A person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming.
So I would like to invite forward anyone that would like to help open our Wonder Box this morning and see what is inside. So please come forward if you'd like to help. And I just wanted to make a quick note. Some of our empty seats this morning are because our 5th through 8th graders are on a field trip this morning. They have been learning about all different religions. They are learning about Christianity this morning, and they are visiting our friends at First Baptist Church this morning. So we are sending all that congregation and our 5th through 8th graders there best wishes and blessings this morning, as we are everyone here. So, wow, I'm so glad I put a lot of different things in this morning. So maybe we have room for about one or maybe for a couple of friends to come together. So, if you would like to come up, Sive, I saw your hand first, so come on up. And then maybe we can make a little line behind Sive. You can choose one thing and tell us what it is. We've got a flower. Thank you. You can sit back down. Come on up, Sarah. We have a book. I think, is it Alessio? Yeah. You want to choose something? You pick something up? Pick pick something out of the box. Can you know what that is? It's a pine cone. Did you know where this pine cone was before it was in the box? Where? Where do you think it was? It was on the Christmas tree. Yeah, good job. Thank you so much. You can go back to your grown-up down here. Thank you. I'm going to hold on to it, okay? So I remember that it was in the box. Come on up, Wesley. Come on up, Wes. You could go next, Mary. What would you like to choose? Ooh, do we know who this is? This is a little figurine of St. Francis. Ben, come on up, and then Mary. Whoa, what do you want to pick? You know what these are?
Yeah, we use these all the time.
You use them all the time?
But I don't remember what they're called.
You don't remember what they're called? Does anyone else maybe remember what they're called? Incense! Yes, they're incense. Thank you, Ben. Come on up, Marin. You've been waiting for a little bit. What's that? It's a crystal, right? Yep, this is an amethyst crystal, which I don't know where you are, Judy. The Judy V gave me. Thank you, Judy.
That's my birthstone.
That's your birthstone? You were meant to pick this one. Yeah, good job. Who would like to be next? Come on up, Lyndon. They are birthday candles. Thank you. Anyone else? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 things left.
It's a chalice.
It's a chalice. Would you like to turn the flame on? It's got a chalice with a little tea light in it. Anyone else? Someone want to come a second time? Okay, Marin, Simon, Wesley. I think that will do us.
It's real gold.
No, it's not. Can you kind of describe what it is?
It's a statue.
It's a statue. Yes, this is a little statue of Saraswati, who is a Hindu deity. I think I saw Sive and then Wesley as our next couple of people. Maybe Ben and Wesley can go together, and you'll be our last ones. Sive first. Come on up. What's this? What does that look like? It looks like a curtain? A little bit. What if it went like, do you mind if I put this on you for a second? What if it went like that? What does that feel? A vase or a yeah, where do you see these?
On weddings?
Yes, at weddings. Good job. And we've got, I think Wesley and Ben, we're going to come get our last thing out of our Wonder Box. All right. What do we've got? You have any idea what that is? It's a little statue. Yep, this is Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion in Buddhism. So we have a lot of things. We have a lot of things. We have some little statue figurines. We have a crystal. We have an ornament. We have birthday candles. We have incense. We have a flower, we have a storybook, a chalice, and a veil. It's almost like a sparkly ghost, this one, makes me think of it. So all of these things may be things or are often things that are used in rituals, which is what we're talking about today. And rituals are a series of actions, sometimes they're traditions, that we use sometimes in worship ceremonies, like our chalice. Our chalice we often light, right? Like every time we start worship, we light it when we often come together to meet for our classes, when we come together even for board meetings and other meetings, always as a reminder that what we do together is special as our people, in our relationships, in our covenant. That's the promises we make to each other. Now, the imagery of our chalice goes back all the way back to the 1930s, but it wasn't until actually the 1980s that we started utilizing them in 3D form. It wasn't, and the adults didn't really see these at least until the 1980s in worship, but you know what? A little bit before, either in the earlier 80s or even in the late 70s, guess who were using chalices first? Ben, kids. Often things that happen amongst children in religious education later end up because the adults thought it was really, really cool, and they started using it too. So we have birthday candles that we use on our birthdays as a ritual when we blow them out. I learned that first started happening in the mid-1700s, at least documented in Germany, and it didn't come to the United States until like the 1870s. We've got a storybook. When do some of us sometimes read stories or have someone read a story to us? You can just yell it out. What time? Is there a certain time? Nighttime, at bedtime, right? So reading books together can be a bedtime ritual. A lot of people use things like incense and crystals, or maybe a statue or figurine of a deity or a person that's important to them, and maybe their prayers or their meditations, and that's a ritual. We've got our Christmas ornament. That's a tradition for a holiday that we use as rituals. We sometimes make them or we buy them and we put them on the tree. And then our flower. So I picked a flower to remind us of our flower ceremony that we hold in June here as Unitarian Universalists. Yes, Mary? Correct. This is a silk flower. It is not a live dying in the box flower. You are correct. But it's representative of when we do our flower ceremony, which we traditionally have here in June, where we bring flowers and then we exchange them and we take home a different flower than what we brought. And it's the 100th anniversary of the first flower ceremony this coming June. So I wanted to share that too. And then last, I brought the wedding veil, because weddings are also a ritual that sometimes are done as a spiritual religious ceremony, sometimes as a secular ceremony, but rites of passage, like our birthdays, like our births, our deaths, and our unions are associated with rituals. They're often passed down from generations. Sometimes we create new ones. One of my new ones around doing ornaments is and I know I'm the only one, like around, during the year when I visit places on vacation, I might buy an ornament to put it on my holiday tree. And then every year when I get to unbox them and put them on, it's sort of like this retrospective of my life, and I remember those things and the people that are with me, that were with me then. So what rituals have in common, and Meg reminded me of this, who's going to be preaching a little bit later, is that they are about connection. Sometimes that is about a connection to a great mystery that some people know as God. Many times they are about connection to family, friends, our communities, our spiritual communities, maybe our communities at school, in our neighborhoods. Often it's about connection to ourselves too. So I wanted to encourage, some of you have chalices you've made maybe years past or have been given to you. Some of you may be using them at home, but I want to share with everyone, yes, we use chalices in our meetings together here at UU Princeton, but they're not meant to only stay here at UU Princeton. They are also symbols that you can use at home in your ritual life for meditation or prayer, or before you have a meal together, or in the morning before you go to school or work to have some quiet time or at bedtime as you're settling in. So for those of you who are kids or youth that don't yet have a chalice at home, there are some kits, do-it-yourself little chalice kits that you can make a flower pot chalice that are right on that table at Robinson Lounge. So don't forget to grab one before you go home. And then you can make one, and there's even some little handy tips about how you can use that at home, okay? So that is the end of our Wonder and Wisdom this morning. We send you so many blessings as you go off to your learnings and gatherings and friendship making today, and we will sing as we go.
And let us join together in prayer. Holy One of the earth and stars and all people, thank you for this day, for these lives, for these friendships, and for love. Thank you for unexpected moments of joy and the surprise of laughter and the beauty that can sneak up upon us and catch our breath. For the ancestors and their abiding wisdom, for the young and their growing inspiration, for those we've loved and lost who live on in our hearts of tender memory, we lift up gratitude this day and always. We pray to be your servants through acts of love and lives of justice and offerings of compassion. Let our gratitude be enlivened in the gifts we give others in the world. Let our worship of you be made manifest in our embrace of the stranger and the care of the neighbor and the love of our hearts given freely to this wounded world. Let our faith be made real in deeds of love and justice and brought to life in blessing the lives around us. And here in the silence, we offer these, the prayers and meditations of our hearts. May it be so, and amen.
I wasn't raised in a religious household. Quite the opposite. Just like lots of kids from the 80s in this part of the world, I was raised in a secular way. My family practiced the standard Christian-ish traditions. Christmas starring Santa and his presents. Easter starring the Easter Bunny and his chocolate likenesses. Beyond saying the Pledge of Allegiance at school, singing Happy Birthday at birthday parties, or gathering to watch fireworks and eat hot dogs on the 4th of July, life for a kid like me didn't feature much collective ritual, and certainly not anything requiring attentive solemnity. In fact, very much of life felt intentionally informal. Perhaps this was a product of whatever kind of liberation movements happened shortly before I was born. A generation rejecting social norms, women gaining more independence, blossoming individualism. Maybe they were right about rock and roll. Against that background of informality, a moment from one holiday dinner with my family sticks in my memory. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and before the big meal, my mother and my aunt had recited the Lord's Prayer. I'd never heard them do this before. And they weren't doing it in earnest. They were just playfully testing their memories. Kind of like, can you still say it? I heard, Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. For we ourselves forgive everyone who is indebted to us, and lead us not into temptation. I remember thinking to myself, this must have been important if they both still remember it so perfectly. After this, they laughed and then recounted more shared childhood memories. At that point in my life, still a child myself, I wasn't too keen on sitting around and listening to old people talk. And I say old, but after doing the math, I see that they must have been just about as old as I am now. Anyway, this time I stayed in place, entertained and fascinated. The whole scene starting with that prayer, triggered an epiphany that these familiar people had pre-existed my birth, that their lives were long and rich, filled with individual days and shared experiences, just like the ones I was living at that very moment. It struck me that their childhood memories were my present reality, that someday I would be like them thinking back to this moment. But what would be my equivalent of the Lord's Prayer? What magic words might so neatly tie my life to another's? The next time I heard the Lord's Prayer was at my grandparents' funerals. Now, they died coincidentally on the same day from totally different ailments, and thus they had a shared service. It was each of their second marriages, so though they had been married for decades together, double networks of family and acquaintances gathered together from far and wide for the occasion. This time, a whole room of adult voices, old and the even older voices, made the prayer resonate, not just figuratively. I could literally feel the words vibrating in my body, and I'll never forget their power in that incredibly surreal experience. I wondered how all of these people from different places and times came to know them so well. How many pastimes of Sunday schools and family dinners and church pews had come together in those shared lines. And how was it that I knew nothing of them at all? There was no Lord's Prayer at my mother's funeral. This is something I'm not really sure if I regret or not. To be honest, at the time, it hadn't even occurred to me to include them, since they had no meaning in my life. I wouldn't have known the words, and the people present who were around my age wouldn't have known them either. But maybe my mom would have expected them to be there. Now, thinking back, I wonder how many people in attendance might have felt like something important was missing. I still do not say the Lord's Prayer, nor do I know it by heart. It's probably a good time to learn it. But I do sometimes revisit it and take its message to heart. I am happy when I hear my 6-year-old daughter sing Spirit of Life spontaneously around the house. I have a sense that I'm doing something right when my family says our congregation's unison affirmation together in this shared space of communion. Beyond a few popular song lyrics, it is possible that 30 years from now, those will be the only words that neatly tie any of our lives together.
Good morning, everybody. So I was reading this Yale research paper titled Pro-Social Correlates of Transformative Experiences at Secular Multi-Day Mass Gatherings. And yes, that is what Burning Man is, among other things. It is a secular, multi-day mass gathering that takes place in the Nevada desert every year with 80,000 people. And what these researchers try to do is find out whether Burning Man and a UK event that is modeled upon it really did change people. And did those transformations last? Led by an associate professor of psychology at Yale, the research team conducted field studies of more than 1,200 people by setting up booths at the events, inviting passersby to, quote, play games for science. They were asked about their experiences while experiencing them, but also right after the mass gatherings and 6 months later. Overall, 63.2% said they had transformative experiences so profound that they left feeling radically changed, including a substantial number of people who did not expect or desire to be transformed. Footnote, transformative experiences were more intense among the 28% of subjects who reported taking psychedelic substances. Now, I was not a subject in this study, which was conducted about 5 years ago. And for you data nerds, I can provide a link to the full results later on. But I can absolutely report that Burning Man transformed me, both the first time I went in 2019 and this past summer. And it wasn't a result of psychedelic substances, although I will confess that we did pop a few capsules full of supposed magic mushrooms one night that my campmate John had brought from California. But other than John saying that colors were just a wee bit brighter for a brief period of time, our epiphanies and experiences were not goosed or juiced by drugs. Reverend Bill invited me to give a sermon after my first trip to Burning Man, and I called it Finding the Beloved Community at Burning Man. I talked about how the experience was both magical and challenging. Extreme heat and dust paired with spectacular art and deep human connections. I spoke about how the 10 principles of Burning Man overlap significantly with our own 7 principles. I'm not going to list all 10 of the Burner principles, but if you want a refresher, I did embroider them all onto the quilt over here that I made after my first burn. Thank you for the close-up. One of the things that my first burn helped me appreciate is why the founders hate for the event to be called a festival. Burners prefer to call it a community, or a social experiment, or even a pilgrimage. Partly because a festival is about spectating, and Burning Man is all about participating. You participate in a culture that the participants build themselves. It's a temporary city erected every year in a dry lake bed, and while it exists, Black Rock City is the 4th largest city in Nevada. While there's a ton of reinvention and freshness every year, what really struck me the second burn was the absolutely astonishing amount of ritual. Everywhere, every day, in every aspect. Apparently, founder Larry Harvey was a little obsessed with ritual. He studied the ways religious folk use ritual to create meaning. He once wrote, about 15 years after the event began, quote, "My principal intention as an artist is to create a ritual culture which is accessible to people living in non-traditional society." Translation. He wanted to create a culture that was really deeply centered in ritual, but he wanted to do it for people who didn't grow up in a tribe or a close-knit group of people who just didn't have a lot of ritual. People who grew up in the secular, individualistic, free-for-all culture that most of America has lived in for some time. Now that's a pretty freaky mission, and it's not what most people think Burning Man is. So what I want to do is share some of the amazing rituals of Burning Man and talk about how they might translate into your life. It even begins with a ritual, this event. Weeks before the event in July, a crew gathers in the desert to begin laying out the grid for the city. They start by pounding a 3-foot spike painted gold into the exact spot where the man will burn. The crew leader takes the first swing with the sledgehammer, and then he breaks a bottle of champagne over the spike, and then everyone else on the crew gets a turn to pound it in. At Burning Man, all first-timers are asked by a greeter to lie down, to get out of their trucks or their cars or their campers and lie down on the ground and make a dust angel in the alkaline playa dust. The standard burner-to-burner greeting all week long is, "Welcome home." On the daily, everyone cheers and howls when the sun goes down. And on Tuesday, almost everyone wears a tutu. Everyone has a playa name, and that name is supposed to be bestowed by a campmate and not one's own self. My playa name is Stitches. Every year there are performances by the Black Rock Symphony Orchestra. And every year there is a naked pub crawl, in which hundreds of nude men ride their bikes between a pre-selected group of playa bars. Indeed, a good number of burners wear as little as possible all week, especially on days when the temperature soars above 100. What burners wear and don't wear is another playground for ritual. But even women wearing just a thong and pasties and men sporting loincloths will usually wear a hat and boots for safety's sake. And they will almost always have a kerchief or a face mask around their neck and goggles. Also notable are the burners who wear lavish outfits, often of their own design, like these two gay men from Chicago who are famous for wearing these wild, geometric, black and white, head-to-toe outfits, like something out of Alice in Wonderland, with these wild headpieces. I met and bonded with these guys partly because this year I decided to go all black and white myself. And I had so much fun playing with it. The statue of the man is burned on Saturday night, the hugest and best attended ritual of the week, of course. But there are all kinds of fire rituals leading up to that, often involving a dedicated group of volunteers called the Fire Enclave. These are fire performers from all over the world who will dance with fire around the man's base just before he burns. On Monday of Burn Week, Crimson Rose, a Burning Man founder who used to be a fire dancer in San Francisco, starts a fire in a ceremonial cauldron called El Diablo. The intention is to start the fire using the light of the sun, but if that does not work, the Bic lighter is just fine. Now this flame that she starts is kept in this cauldron in a prominent place in the center camp. And there are certain people that their job is to, keep the flame going because they use that to light the man on fire on Saturday. But what's cool is that there is a bin of twigs and sticks that are next to that cauldron, and anybody is invited as they pass by to help stoke the flames. Another ritual of participation. In the aftermath of the big burn, still more rituals. On Sunday morning, some people cook bacon on the embers of the man. For some reason, bacon is huge at Burning Man. Others scramble around in the rubble as it cools for keepsakes. And one of my very favorite things. On Sunday, there is a jazz funeral for the man. And it is a full-out spectacle that is just a joy to see. You see, there's a whole special camp on the edge of things of people from New Orleans. It's called the Black Rock French Quarter. Yes, they give away free beignets every day also. On Sunday night, it's the temple that burns. As I shared in my 2019 sermon, the temple is a beautiful wooden structure where people can place photographs and mementos of loved ones who have died. It is a quiet, spiritual place bursting with individual and ad hoc rituals. When the man burns, the rambunctious roar of the crowd is overwhelming. But the crowd is hushed when the temple burns. Very different kinds of catharsis. To leap from the sublime to the ridiculous in true burner fashion, I must also tell you about the porta potty rituals. I read that there are nearly 2,000 porta potties in Black Rock City, generally arranged in rows of 20. I heartily embrace the ritual of having them pumped out twice a day. They're pretty central to the experience of Burning Man and thus to the shared culture of Burning Man, which I must warn you runs the gamut from whimsy to prank. You can be walking down a column of portos trying to find an unoccupied one and have somebody sidle up to you and go, "Try number 14." And that's because there are some people who adopt individual porta potties that are near their camp. And this might just mean that they keep stocking hand sanitizer and toilet paper, which are not usually placed in there. But they might also playfully and obsessively decorate the entire inside. My favorite porta potty so far was completely papered inside with New Yorker cartoons. And on the wall, somebody had attached an air freshener dispenser. And there was also some kind of a device, I think it was probably an iPod, that was playing on repeat an excerpt from a Terry Gross interview on fresh air. Get it? Fresh air. Now, there's another great porta potty that I didn't experience personally, but a couple years ago, there was a prankster who brought a red carpet to Burning Man. And what he did is he stationed himself near this one porta potty that I think he chose at random. And he rolled out, he waited for some unsuspecting person to go into the porta potty and lock the door, and then he rolled out the red carpet right up to the door. And he also had with him, rope lines to go on either side of the red carpet. And then he just started recruiting people walking by at random to become the crowd on either side of the rope lines. So this poor person opens the door when they finish their business, and there are all these people shouting and screaming, and, like there's some huge celebrity of the moment, and they're all shouting, "Speech, speech!" If you don't believe me, go to YouTube and look up Burning Man Toilet Prank 2015. And while you're on YouTube, I also recommend Burning Man 2018 Best Porta Potty Ever. That's a good one. There are theme cams at Burning Man, more than 1,000 of them. And there's a ton of embedded ritual within those camps, some of which have been part of Black Rock City for decades. Some work camps are organized around people, groups of volunteers who build and operate Black Rock City, like the Lamplighters. And this is a group of volunteers in white robes with flames painted on the hems. And in a daily ceremony before sunset, a procession of them carry 1,000 kerosene lamps. And they use these long poles to hang them up on these spires that have these long walkways toward the man. Theme camps are generally organized around whatever the camp's gift to the playa might be, and that could be free food, free yoga, free booze, whatever it might be. And ritual often undergirds the ways in which these gifts are dispensed. Like this camp I stopped by one evening this past year after my volunteer shift in Center Camp. And it was super hot and dusty, and I was exhausted. And I saw they were offering a sort of snow cone with fresh fruit in it. So I joined the line. But they don't just hand you one. It's a complete experience. It's a ritual. So I'm standing there in line, and there's a guy to my right, and he's spritzing this mist of cool water all over my face and my body. And on the left side is a guy with this super ornate fan, and he's fanning me up and down to keep the cooling experience going. And then a guy comes up, and it's my turn, and he's a waiter, and he takes me over there. There's all these little tables set up, and he takes me over to one that has an empty seat, and he sits me down and hands me a menu. And on the menu are 3 things, 3 different snow cones, each of them named for a sex act. My snow cone was, I'm not going to say what it was called, was delicious and refreshing. And I had the most wonderful conversation with these random strangers, as one does at Burning Man. But I think this example gets at the incredible playfulness of ritual at Burning Man, as well as the occasional touch of raunch, which is very much there. So my volunteer work at the Burn this year was at something called the Artery. And it's a resource center that works closely with artists who bring projects to install on the playa. And once again, ritual plays a role. For example, when artists come, it's revealed to them, when they come to the Artery, it's revealed to them where their art piece is going to be placed. But the Arterians don't just say, these are the coordinates, we'll get you a golf cart, and if you need it, something, a cherry pick or whatever. They don't just say, here it is. They walk the artist over to this huge map on the wall, and they just make it a ceremony, and they place the dot of this is where your art is. And the artists are so thrilled. They clap, they scream, they usually take a selfie, and it's part of celebrating what a big deal it is that they bring their art here. Some get some grants to pay their expenses, but it's a lot of work and a lot of expense to do this, and they want to make it special. But the Artery also exists to introduce the art to burners, which led to my very favorite personal ritual this year. The Artery schedules art tours all week, mostly by bicycle or on foot. For people who have mobility issues, they get to go on an art car. So I got to lead a sunset bike tour for about a dozen people to see about a dozen artworks that I had personally selected to talk about out of the 419 that were out there. So one of the ones was the first artwork that was going to burn that year, so we stayed and watched that. Now I had spent hours picking out the art, studying it, seeing how it looked during the day, seeing what it looked like after dark. And it was my first time doing this, and I was kind of a wreck. I didn't know if the microphone pack would work. I didn't know if my bike would break, which was happening a lot this year. But I was so excited and passionate to share the art with everybody. And so when we set off, I told my little group that it was my very first time, and they all applauded. So we were at the last stop, and it was in front of a huge piece modeled after an Egyptian temple. And my friend John, who'd come along to help me, took everyone who was still left on the tour, a couple people had peeled off, took everyone inside this building, this temple, and up to the second floor so they could have this incredible view of the playa at night, which is just covered with LED lights and all kinds of crazy things. And so he was up there, and I had this moment. I was waiting with everybody's bikes in a group, and I just had my own personal joy ritual. There was an art car parked, loud, throbbing music, and I just started just dancing my heart out, and just felt such joy that I could be there and have this moment. And unbeknownst to me, John got a picture of this, which was really wonderful. So Burning Man oozes ritual. It makes ritual a centerpiece. And one of the many things I love about that is the way it inspires participants to make rituals of their own. Whether it's one of the many weddings that happen every year on the playa, or a group of friends that always meets at the trash fence before dawn on Friday mornings. The trash fence is at the very edge of things. In 2019, while cruising the playa one midday looking at art, I met this guy whose private ritual was to eat lunch inside a different art installation every single day. This year I met a man who for several decades, who's taken it upon himself to make these gorgeous, elaborate necklaces. He makes about 20 of them a year. And after examining all the art in a given year, he chooses the art pieces that personally move him the most. And then he ceremoniously bestows a necklace on each of the makers. This guy who drives around in an art car shaped like Aladdin's slipper is an art jury of one, but it's considered a huge honor to get one of his necklaces. And I learned that his admirers in the art circles at Burning Man were planning a special surprise celebration to honor him for doing that. I came across a quote I love from an unnamed Burning Man Project board member who said, "The more digital we get, the more ritual we need." And I couldn't agree more. The more digital we get, the more ritual we need. To sum up a couple things about ritual at Burning Man, it is intentional and pervasive, and it combines two burner principles that sometimes clash: radical self-expression and radical inclusion. There may be snark, there may be whimsy, but in true burner ethos, everyone can participate. So I want to end with an invitation to you. Not necessarily to Burning Man, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I invite you all to be burners at heart, to appreciate and make ritual for joy and connection and community in your own lives. I am not suggesting a naked pub crawl in your neighborhood. But what is your version of eating inside a work of art every day? What is your version of surprising someone with a red carpet in a context where that would work? What is your version of ceremoniously honoring people whose work you feel is important and deserves to be lifted up? Is there a way that you can greet people and celebrate with them that is more colorful and personal than maybe some of the things you've done in the past? What will help light a fire in you? Clearly, if I had been interviewed for the Yale study, I would have been among the 63.2% of people who have been radically transformed. I have to confess to you guys that last Sunday, and I know some of you were here last Sunday, when I was blessing and hugging almost every single person in this sanctuary as part of a New Year's ritual that Reverend Bill and I created together, the thought crossed my mind: this feels like the most burner thing I have done in many months. Burn on, my friends, burn on. May it be so.
Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always with neighbor and stranger by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.